I've done it in the middle of the night when I've needed something, and I love that fact. Where the scrutiny needs to be applied is on that me and my account are GRC. That's the identity binding that needs to be absolutely verified. And what's cool is, independent of my certificate recycling and renewal, I will get contacted by someone from DigiCert saying, hey, we need to re-verify you for EV status. So, which is, I think, is brilliant. So what they've done is they've decoupled the timing of the identity binding to the account from the certificate issuance, allowing the account holder to issue EV certificates whenever they need to, and then while at the same time not degrading the integrity of the process, because they are asynchronously making sure you're still you. So I love that question, and I just wanted to note that there is a way that you can get the best of both worlds, and that's the service that DigiCert, in my experience alone, has been offering me, and I really appreciate it. And then I love this one other tweet from itinerant. Itinerant? Yeah. Wait, is that the way you pronounce it?
Yeah,
yeah.
Itinerant.
Itinerant.
Yeah.
For some reason, that just seemed wrong to me. Itinerant engineer. Anyway, I love this. He tweeted both to me and to Swift on Security the observation, quote, perfect forward secrecy, unquote, is the, quote, I guess you just had to be there of encryption. And of course, that's exactly what it is.
And somebody just bought a copy.
And somebody just bought a copy of SpinRite. Thank you. And our final break, Leo, and then we'll talk about Pwn to Own 2018.
Indeed, we will, Mr. G. Our show today brought to you by Rocket Mortgage. You know, I think the financial services industry thinks you guys have a lot of money. Security Now listeners are a rich crew. We got banking, we got home loans, we got credit cards. Rocket Mortgage actually is for anybody who can't write a check for a house. If you can't pay cash, well, then you're going to get a home loan, right? And why not get it from the best home loan company in the world? Quicken Loans, #1 in customer satisfaction, 8 years in a row. They're now the #1 in terms of loans. I just saw a number like what was the number? 2 million loans, something like that. Largest lender in the country. And I think some of that goes to Rocket Mortgage. They're completely online mortgage approval solution. Now, this is really great. If you're a geek like me, you don't really want to put on a necktie and go down to the bank and apply for a loan. I mean, what a waste of time, And you fill out an application, then you're not done then. No, you got to go home and find pay stubs and bank statements, go up in the attic or down in the cellar. It's ridiculous. With Quicken Loans' new Rocket Mortgage, you could do the whole thing online. No necktie. You don't have to get off the couch. You could do this on your phone at an open house. That's how easy it is. It's a complete client-focused technological revolution in the home loan industry. Rocket Mortgage. You get the confidence you need when it comes to buying a home, or I should say refinancing as well, if you have an existing home loan. It's simple. You'll know completely what's going on. You'll understand all the details and be confident you're getting the right mortgage for you. And it's really convenient because you don't have to go to the basement to get the financial records. All their trusted partners mean you can share your financial information with Rocket Mortgage just by saying, okay, touch a button. Whether you're looking to buy your first home or your 10th, Rocket Mortgage can do it for you, and they can do it for you not in months or weeks or days, but in minutes. Minutes. Based on your income, your assets, your credit, Rocket Mortgage will analyze all the home loan options. Computers are pretty fast these days. And find the ones that are right for you. You choose the term, the down payment, the rate. You're approved. Boom. Rocket Mortgage. Apply simply, understand fully, and mortgage confidently. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/securitynow. That's rocketmortgage.com/securitynow. They're an equal housing lender. Licensed in all 50 states. It's NMLSConsumerAccess.org, number 3030. You actually, if you go right now to rocketmortgage.com/security now, press that button that says refi or the button that says buy a home. Just fill out the, sign up for the account. You'll be ready to go. It'll take just a minute or two to finish it up. Never know. You might see that perfect house on the way home from work today. You'll be glad you did. rocketmortgage.com/security. Now. All right, Steve, on we go.
So,
hone to own. I'm going to get my sportscaster.
yeah, we've got it. The way they wrote up the blow by blow, I just thought you'd have our listeners would get a kick out of you.
I don't know if I have a sportscaster.
You got a million voices, Leo.
I'll find one.
Bottom line is that China was sorely missed. China's hackers routinely win at Pwn to Own, typically sweeping the board. And notably, we talked in previous years, the Tencent and the Keen, Keen teams that have been the big winners in the last couple of years competition. In last year's competition of Pwn to Own, the top 5 winners were from China, and 3 of them were from the Tencent group. And as I mentioned when we were on the front side of Pwn to Own, the Chinese government has decided that they're going to keep their hackers at home. And so there were no Chinese entrants this year, and it showed. There are potentially many bugs and cash prizes to be had. Last year, which was the event's 10-year anniversary, since the first one was 2007, the Zero Day Initiative awarded a total of $833,000 to white hat hackers. $833,000 to white hat hackers, exposing 51 different zero-day bugs. And most of those were found by Chinese researchers. This year, by comparison, despite pulling together a purse of $2 million available dollars, this year's hackers took home only $267,000 out of that total of $2 million, despite the fact that it was a target-rich environment. Oracle's VirtualBox, VMware Workstation, Microsoft Hyper-V Client, Chrome, Safari, Edge, Firefox, Adobe Reader, Microsoft Office 365, Microsoft Outlook, Nginx, Apache Web Server, Microsoft Windows SMB, and OpenSSL. All of those were valid targets for exploitation, and despite the fact very few of them were exploited. Mostly the browsers took a hit. Actually, it was browsers and, in one case, VirtualBox. And $267,000 in total this year, despite the fact that the largest prize was $250,000 for a sandbox escape from hypervisor to the kernel under Hyper-V.
Now, they had one of those last year.
No takers.
Isn't it possible, though, that this software was more secure, like these things have been patched? Or you think the Chinese team just has all these exploits and no one else does?
I think that they're good. I think
this is bad, because now we don't know what they can do.
Oh, it's definitely bad, Leo. It's bad.
I mean, they're not exactly friendly adversaries.
No. And also, the timing was a little unfortunate because several non-Chinese competitors dropped out at the last minute after the immediately previous day's Patch Tuesday, which closed some holes they'd been planning to exploit.
Man.
So it was like, whoops.
So I have some misgivings about this whole thing, because people hold on to exploits for a whole year.
Yes,
instead
for
of
the competition.
Responsible disclosure.
Yes.
They're trying to make money. Now, it says here that that the Pwn to Own, the CanSec West people, buy these exploits. What does that mean?
And it's weird too. And that's the language that they use. Is that they?
Does that mean they hold on to them?
Yes. Well, no. It means that They purchased them. The zero-day initiative is run by Trend Micro, so Trend Micro protects their users immediately as a benefit of using Trend Micro's, anti-malware products. And then they do then responsibly disclose them to the vendors of the products.
Right away.
So they're not. Yes,
Okay.
yes, right away. So this year's winner succeeded in 2 instances. And you'll be reading his name in a second. Richard, and you pronounced it correctly. Chu. Won the contest with 12 points for hacking Edge and Firefox, and took home, out of that 267,000, 120 of that. But anyway, I thought I thought our listeners would get a kick out of you sort of taking us through the competition.
This is a lot. I'm only going to do a few paragraphs. I'll let you do the rest.
Day 1. The first day of Pwn to Own 2018 has come to a close, and so far we've awarded $162,000 and 16 points toward Master of Pwn. Oh, I love this. Today saw 2 successful attempts, 1 partial success, and 1 failure. In total, we purchased 3 Apple bugs, 2 Oracle bugs, 3 Microsoft bugs, and a partridge in a pear tree. No. The day. Oh, I love this. This play-by-play is pretty funny.
Yes.
The day began with Richard Jew, Fluorescence, targeting Apple Safari with a sandbox escape. Unfortunately, he couldn't get his exploit chain working within the time allotted due to a failure in the heap spray technique. Oh, no! Despite this, the bugs he brought to the contest were certainly interesting and were purchased through the regular ZDI program. I guess that's what we were talking about. They give money even though he didn't do it right, or it didn't work.
Correct.
Undaunted, Richard later returned to target Microsoft Edge with a Windows kernel elevation of privilege exploit, EOP, bringing a flair for the dramatic. After his first attempt failed, he proceeded to debug his exploit in front of the crowd while still on the clock. His second attempt nearly succeeded, but the target blue screen just as his shell started. Oh, Richard! But his third attempt succeeded with 1 minute and 37 seconds left on the clock. How long do they give him?
10 minutes.
10 minutes? Yeah. Whoa. In the end, he used 2 use after free bugs in the browser linked to an integer overflow in the kernel to successfully run his code with elevated privileges. Nice going, Richard. His dramatic last-ditch... That's you, right? You wrote that.
I did.
His dramatic last-ditch effort earned him $70,000 and 7 points toward Master of Pwn. All right, that's quite enough of that. Quite enough of that. But it is dramatic. Have you ever watched one of these?
No, I
kind
have
of
not.
fun.
Yes,
I take it they have an audience.
Yep, they have a bunch of people watching, so it's done in front of a group. Actually, I misspoke. It's 10 minutes average, so it's 3 attempts and 30 minutes.
Oh, half an hour. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of time.
And so
I love him debugging it on the fly.
Yes, the clock is ticking, and he's like, "Oh crap, why didn't that work?" And so these guys know their stuff.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So anyway, essentially there were several Apple Safari escapes. All of them were elevation of privilege exploits. There was also one found in Edge that we just talked about, and one in Firefox.
Right, I'll read you the next one because it's too good. I'm sorry. I'm just looking at it.
It really is, Leo.
Up next, Nicholas Baumstark, or Nixlab, from the Fenhex team, targeted the Oracle VirtualBox. Apparently not one for added intrigue, his exploit immediately popped not 1, not 2, but 3 different calculator apps to rub his success into Oracle's face. His demonstration qualified as a partial success as he used an out-of-bounds read and a time of check, time of use, to still earn him $27,000 and 3 Master of Pwn points. It was a great demonstration, and we look forward to more of Niklas's research in the future. What is he, 12? Probably, right? This kid's going somewhere, folks. The final attempt on day 1 saw Saniel Gross, or Phalo of Fenhex, targeting Apple Safari with a Mac OS kernel elevation of privilege. Last year, his exploit involved a touch bar component, and this year proved to be no different, folks. Sam deftly leveraged a combination of a just-in-time optimization bug in the browser, whoops, Apple, and then a macOS logic bug to escape the sandbox. And finally, a kernel overwrite to execute code with a kernel extension and successfully exploit Apple's Safari. This lovely exploit chain earned him $65,000 and 6 points toward Master of Pwn. As he did last year, he left a message for us on the touch bar once he was complete. What was the message? They don't say.
No.
Something like F you, Apple, right? Take that. He leveraged the touch bar.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
If you're one of these big companies, you got to look at this day and go, oh boy. Is there video?
Yep.
Bleak said, wait a minute, let me see. There seems like there might be video.
Yeah, there are videos of this happening.
Them doing this.
Yeah, on the second day, it says the day began with the return of Richard, this time taking aim at Mozilla Firefox with a browser kernel elevation of privilege. He eschewed all drama today and successfully popped Mozilla Firefox on his first attempt with his clever use of an out-of-bounds write in the browser followed by an integer overflow in the Windows kernel to earn himself another $50,000 and 5 more Master of Pwn points.
I want to go
To bring
next year. I
his
wanna see
event
this.
total to, yeah.
Look, and he gets
Yeah.
like a drone trophy. That's a bug.
And he's very happy.
Oh, that is so funny.
Yeah.
Good for Richard
Yep.
Jew. Yeah. Well, you know what? I'll extend this offer to CanSec West. If they want me to do play-by-play next year, I'm available.
Well, that was great. So, the follow-up news is, and I don't know what this means, DEF CON China is May 11, 12, and 13 coming up. And so it's going to be held in Beijing, and I don't know what this means in terms of the Chinese government policy relative to having a security show of that sort. Maybe if it's within China's borders, they'll allow their attackers, their hackers to attend. Because it's a standard looking DEF CON layout and format
Well, I
and
think that's the
presentation.
issue. No hackers want to come to the U.S. anymore. You can get arrested.
I know.
Isn't it
As a
ironic that people will go to China? It's safer.
Yep.
Here's the message, by the way. This is a picture of the touch bar. It says "pwned by Salo."
I guess
Nice.
you proved you can handle yourself out there.
Welcome to the world you can't handle.
Fake
Black
code
Mesa,
there.
the possible deception.
So, my friend, that's our podcast.
Our time is up for this fabulous episode of Security Now. Thank you, Steve Gibson. We do this show every Tuesday around about 1:30 p.m. Pacific, 4:30 Eastern, 20:30 UTC. If you want to watch live, you can. You can also at twit.tv/live, by the way. And if you're going to do that, you might as well get in that chat room there where there's some fabulous people chatting along and providing us with images and all of that stuff. irc.twit.tv. Now, Steve has the on-demand audio of this show, and he has something unique at grc.com. Transcripts. Elaine Ferris will be listening to this and trying to write it down. And then handmade transcripts are great, though, for searching. So if you hear something or you want to go back through one of the previous episodes, do you have transcripts for every episode?
Every single one. I had her. She didn't start at the beginning, but after a while, it was proving so useful that I said, okay, let's go back and start from number one.
So you could search for honey monkeys. It would take you right to number one.
God
That's
help.
Yeah, I don't think we've mentioned them since. We have audio and video, oddly enough, of the show. You can get that at twit.tv/SN. While you're at Gibson Research Corporation, Steve's site, grc.com, don't forget to pick up SpinRite, right? The world's best hard drive recovery and maintenance utility. And check out all the other stuff
Come
going
on, Gordon.
over there. Let's
go have some fun.
Beehive of activity.
The zero-point energy
Steve
field manipulator is
wraps
not
up
deployed,
Squirrel,
Alex.
gets back to SpinRite
outta
6,
here.
and all sorts of other fun projects. Inspector is still there. Actually, you probably do want to get Inspector these days, right? See what CPU ID you have.
Yeah, exactly. In order to see whether you got new microcode available.
Yeah, that's grc.com/inspector. It's time for Security Now. Steve Gibson's here.
He was all set to talk about the Memcache exploit spreading like wildfire. That was the culprit in those DDoS attacks, huge DDoS attacks last week. But then, all of a sudden, some significant flaws were revealed in the AMD chipsets. And Steve decided he was going to do a deep dive on that. Lots more security news, too. It's all coming up next on Security Now.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Security Now is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com. This is Security Now with Steve Gibson, episode 654, recorded Tuesday, March 13th, 2018. AMD chipset disaster. Security Now is brought to you by IT Pro TV, binge-worthy learning for IT pros. Visit itpro.tv/securitynow and use the code SN30 to get a free 7-day trial and 30% off a monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. And by Thinkst Canary. Detect attackers or malicious insiders on your network with honeypots that can be deployed in minutes. For 10% off and a 60-day money-back guarantee, go to canary.tools/twit and enter the code TWIT in the How Did You Hear About Us box. And by Cloud Spanner from Google Cloud Platform. Cloud Spanner is the only horizontally scalable and strongly consistent relational database service. To learn more, visit g.co/getspanner today. It's time for Security Now, the show where we protect you and your loved ones online. This is becoming one of our biggest and best shows, and it's thanks to this guy right here, Steve Gibson of grc.com. Hello, Steve.
Hello, Leo. Great to be with you again, as always. For our 654th episode of Security Now, I had intended for this to be a follow-up on last week's disclosure and discussion of the big mem-cached, huge, record-breaking 1.7 terabyte distributed reflection denial of service attacks, and then something even worse happened. But so I was going to call this, mem crashed update or something, and I have all of the sort of like what's happened since last week, which is a lot on that front. And then this morning, a security research firm in Tel Aviv, who gave AMD 24 hours of notice.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Dropped a major bomb that they had found 13 remotely exploitable vulnerabilities in the chipset that AMD uses to sort of offload its security stuff, sort of like the Secure Enclave, and also just a chipset that's like a glue chipset. Anyway, the podcast was pretty much assembled, and everything was in place. And I thought, okay, good. And then because the press release hit and the internet went nuts. And at first I was thinking, okay, well, there's not time to know about all this yet, so let's just do that next week. But as I kept reading it like getting into more of this, and the whole research paper is online, so there was nothing I couldn't find out. And it's like, oh, we can't wait. So this suddenly got renamed from Mem Crashed Update to the AMD Chipset Disaster, which surprisingly is not hyperbole. Yeah.
Oh, man.
So we're going to discuss the just released news of major trouble for AMD's chipset security. And the only possible mitigating factor I can imagine is that maybe there aren't many of them out there, except I think there are, because they're embedded and their laptop and their server and their enterprise, and it's like, ouch. But we're also going to talk about ISPs in the in East Asia have been found actively spreading state-sponsored malware, that is ISPs themselves. A note about Windows 10S that I noted you and Mary Jo and Paul were talking about last week. And I just wanted to let our listeners know about Microsoft's announcement about 10S. We've got a large pile of cryptocurrency mining-driven shenanigans because, of course, there's money in them thar hills, and so you're going to have some shenanigans. Also, tomorrow is our annual Pwn to Own competition start, but there's some news about that and a bit of a twist about a set of contestants that will no longer be appearing. I have some surprising stats. I mean, stunning stats about where our spam is coming from, and then we will finally get to what was going to be the topic of this week, but now it's got pushed down the stack, and that's an update on the mem-cached distributed reflection denial of service attacks and what's going on with them. And in fact, that's our picture of the week that we'll talk about in a second. So I think, yes, another interesting and for owners of AMD-based systems, maybe a little frightening.
Is it the newer Ryzen systems or is it older? AMD?
Yes.
It's
newer
Ryzen systems.
The Ryzen and the Epics, I think is that the way you pronounce it.
I think a lot of people bought these Ryzen systems. Oh, that's not good.
Yeah.
Well, stay tuned. The thrilling, gripping details of the latest bad news exploit coming up in a second. Before we go there, let me go here. IT Pro TV. I love IT Pro TV. I know many of you do. In fact, pretty much every time somebody comes to watch Security Now, almost always they say, oh, and by the way, I love IT Pro TV. That's how I got my job in IT, or that's how I keep my job in IT. IT Pro TV was started by two great guys, Tim and Don. They were IT trainers for a long time. They did all the, IT training stuff in classrooms, that kind of thing. They saw what we were doing. Look at this. They're doing right now MCSA servers, configuring failover clusters. It's that kind of stuff. If you think we're geeky, IT Pro TV is geek squared. Tim and Don have found their niche. What they do is 125 hours a week of live programming. They've got a chat room just like we do in every area of IT training. And then, just like us, those shows then become... There's Don right there. Then become... it's Brian. They have a great team of people. Very fun, entertaining, interesting people. Look, there's my bobblehead behind them. They then become hours of on-demand training in every area of IT. I mean, they have certified ethical hacker, how to use Kali Linux, how to configure, set up, maintain AWS, the ITIL and ISC squared security certificates. There are so many job openings right now in IT. If you were getting out of school and you were asking me what should I do, and you said I like computers, I'd say go to itpro.tv, find something you love, and learn all about it. They have Transcender practice exams with a premium subscription, so you can practice the test before you take the test. They have virtual labs. You don't even need a Windows server to learn how to use a Windows server. I love IT Pro TV, and you will too. That's the point. It's entertaining. You get flexible training on your schedule. You get binge-worthy content in the subjects you care about the most, the stuff you want to learn the most. And, of course, ROI proven. Lots of teams use IT Pro TV to keep on their IT skills. I know many companies that have signed up for accounts. And the IT Pro training portal is great for groups because in fact, you can get a demo of it if you go there and request a demo of the IT Pro TV for Teams on the website. You'll be very impressed. You control everything that's going on in your team's training schedule. You can create custom groups and training assignments. You can put it in works on individuals and the group as a whole. It's really great. So here's the deal. IT Pro TV. If you go to itpro.tv/securitynow, that's the website, itpro.tv/securitynow, you can request a free team trial, as you can see on the right, or
If you use the offer code SN30, you can sign up for an individual monthly membership. You'll get a 7-day free trial, so you can try before you buy, and 30% off your subscription if you do decide to buy for the lifetime of your active subscription. 30% off. Premium subscriptions, which include unlimited transcender practice exams, those are worth $100 by themselves. Virtual labs, normally that's $857 a year. Use that offer code. You'll only pay $600 a year. itpro.tv/security now. Take advantage of the 30% off offer with the offer code SN30. Flexible training, binge-worthy content, ROI proven. 90,000 members, and most of them are listeners to this show. itpro.tv/security now. If you love Steve and you love security and you love IT, it's a fit made in heaven. Steve?
So, our picture of the week was going to tie into the title of the podcast.
Didn't have time for a
Which-
second illustration.
Changed at the last minute. Okay, but get this. More than 15,000 memcached DDoS attacks were aimed at 7,100 sites in just the last 10 days.
This can't all be the same person, right?
No, and this is the problem is that we're not exactly sure how many, but at least 17,000 open, reflectable, memcached servers, which anyone on the internet can use. And as we'll be talking about, if we survive till the end of the podcast, there are now easy-to-use tools where you'd enter an IP address, and it goes and finds available memcached servers from Shodan and starts filling them up and sending them reflection UDP packets. I mean, it was no exaggeration a week ago when we made the podcast about this, because this is without question the most potent class of DDoS attacks we've yet encountered. It is due to the fact that a tiny query can produce a massive response which can be spoofed. The amplification factor, and we've talked about amplification factors of 200, and so you send in 10 bytes and you get 2,000. Woo! Okay, this amplification factor on these memcached DDoS attacks is 51,000.
So for every byte, you get 51K.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And anyway, so we'll come back to this at the end of the podcast. But what this is demonstrating is that this is all. I mean, if anything could have pulled hackers' attention away from crypto jacking, it would be DDoS attack capability that is this juicy and potent and capable. So, like, great. So I'm sure we'll be talking about it next week. The industry is trying to rally itself, but as we know, there are servers scattered all over the internet. Many of them are unattended. Many of them are in closets and have been forgotten, and no one is paying any attention to them. And they'll just happily accept huge blobs of data and then send them out on request. So, yeah. Anyway, there's lots of more news that we will get to at the end of the podcast. But what preempted that as our main focus.
This would be pretty bad if it preempted that.
So a brand new, the very first coverage confused this with Spectre and Meltdown, and this has nothing to do with Spectre and Meltdown. We know that AMD chips have never been susceptible to the meltdown problem, but that they do need some microcode fixes in order to help them mitigate the Spectre problem. So there's that. But a brand new, completely different and kind of and just coincidental timing set of 13 critical flaws have just been reported to affect AMD's Ryzen and EPYC processors. You may want to pull up this site, amdflaws.com. These people are not being shy about their reporting. They've got
Hey, they registered a domain name. They're serious.
They registered a
They're
domain.
serious.
They've got graphics artists at work. They've got videos. They've got.
But this is not AMD. This is the group that discovered it.
Correct.
Is that right?
So the group is yes. The group is CTS Labs. Oh, and you can imagine AMD is not happy right now. They were given, as I mentioned at the top of the show, 1 day, 24 hours notice of this all going public.
But this has a good name, which means it's going to spread like wildfire. Because it's all about the name, right?
It's
Rise
all
and
about
fall. I like it.
That's actually a brilliant name. So the group is CTS Labs. They're an Israeli, Tel Aviv-based team of researchers. Their press release dated March 13th, which is today, 10 a.m. Eastern, said, CTS Labs, a cybersecurity research firm and consultancy, today released a severe security advisory on Advanced Micro Devices, Inc. processors. A CTS Labs security audit, they write, revealed multiple critical security vulnerabilities and manufacturer backdoors in AMD's latest EPYC, that's EPYC, Ryzen Pro, and Ryzen Mobile processors. Now, technically, these are in the chipsets, that is the supporting chips, but we'll get to that in a second. These vulnerabilities have the potential to put organizations at significantly increased risk of cyber attacks. CTS Labs has produced a white paper report further detailing these vulnerabilities, available at amdflaws.com. And there's like several offers on that page to download the white paper, which of course I did and spent some time with it. CTS Labs has also shared this information with, I'll add editorially, yesterday, AMD, Microsoft, HP, Dell, and select security companies in order that they may work on developing mitigations and patches and examine and research these and other potential vulnerabilities at the company. That is to say, AMD. CTS Labs has also shared this information with relevant U.S. regulators. CTS Labs, they write, is a cybersecurity research firm and consultancy based in Tel Aviv, Israel, specializing in hardware and embedded system security. For more information about CTS Labs, please see cts-labs.com. Okay, so as I've said, the vulnerabilities don't affect AMD's Zen CPU cores themselves, but rather two different chips that are part of the Ryzen and EPYC system set. The first is the ARM-based AMD Secure processor, which, as I mentioned before, is kind of like their equivalent of the Secure Enclave. And the second is known as the Promontory chipset, which is produced by Taiwanese subcontractor AS Media, and these people are not happy about the work that AS Media, that is CTS Labs, is unhappy about that. So all there has been so far from AMD, because this just happened, is that AMD responded, quote, "At AMD, security is a top priority, and we're continually working to ensure the safety of our users as new risks arise." Daily. They continue, "We are investigating this report, which we just received, to understand the methodology and merit of the findings." And so I need to say also that, my first reaction upon seeing this was, okay, wait, maybe we should hold off saying anything. but that would mean a week delay rather than a day delay. And so I thought, well, no, the best that could happen is that it turns out that this is wrong. But it seems the more I looked at it and dug into their research, the more credible and verifiable this appeared. Okay, so what happened? 13 critical security vulnerabilities and what they describe as manufacturer backdoors were discovered throughout AMD Ryzen and EPYC product lines. In their little Q&A that is on at the AMDflaws.com site, they said, "Am I affected?" The answer: any consumer or organization purchasing AMD servers, workstations, or laptops are affected by these vulnerabilities. And of course, we have to back that off a little bit and say if they contain these affected chipsets. And so they said the site is to inform the public about the vulnerabilities and call upon AMD and the security community to fix the vulnerable products. I doubt that much calling upon will be necessary. But they have another site, safefirmware.com, where the white paper can be found at /AMDflaws_whitepaper.pdf. So there are a total of 4 vulnerabilities, 3 in firmware and 1 in hardware. And this Chimera is the 4th hardware vulnerability, which is unfixable, they claim, because it is a hardware problem. It is something, apparently, a backdoor built into, presumably by this AMD subcontractor we'll get to in a second. The other 3, there's Rise and Fall, there's Fallout, and Master Key, are firmware vulnerabilities, which presumably can be fixed. These guys in their research did succeed in rewriting the firmware remotely of this firmware reprogrammable outboard chip that does the security, and were able to install persistent threats into the firmware. So it looks to me like the biggest problem, I mean, just in terms of practical remediation, is with Chimera. And so they write backdoors inside Ryzen chipset. The Chimera vulnerabilities are an array of hidden manufacturer backdoors inside AMD's Promontory chipsets. These chipsets are an integral part of all Ryzen and Ryzen Pro workstations. There exist 2 sets of backdoors differentiated by their implementation. One is implemented within the firmware running on the chip, while the other is inside the chip's ASIC, ASIC hardware. Because the latter has been manufactured into the chip, a direct fix may not be possible, and the solution may involve either a workaround or a recall. The backdoors outlined in this section, I'm reading from their paper, provide multiple pathways for malicious code execution inside the chipset's internal processor. Because the chipset is a core system component, running malware inside the chip could have far-reaching security implications. The diagram below, and they have a diagram in their PDF that basically shows the Ryzen CPU connected to this big red box, red because bad, where like everything, all of the I/O in the system is going there. The LAN and the Wi-Fi and the USB. I mean, it's the switchboard for the CPU. So it says the diagram below was taken from the instruction manual of Asus Crosshair 6 Hero Ryzen motherboard. It can be seen that not only is the chipset connected to the computer's USB, SATA, and PCIe ports, which is to say pretty much everything, it is also linked to the computer's LAN, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth. In our research, they write, we've been able to execute our own code inside the chipset and then leverage the latter's direct memory access engine, the DMA engine, to manipulate the operating system running on the main processor. These two capabilities form the foundation for malware and provide a proof of concept. We believe that with additional research, a determined attacker, who of course now knows where to look, may also be able to reach the following capabilities. And so they tick off a keylogger. It may be possible to implement a stealthy keylogger by listening to USB traffic that flows through the chipset. Network access. It may be possible to implement network-based malware by leveraging the chipset's position as a middleman for the machine's LAN, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth. Bypass memory protection. It may be possible to leverage the chipset's position to access protected memory areas such as the system management RAM. They say we have verified this works on a small set of desktop motherboards. So they have a second section that I'm sharing just because it's inflammatory but worrisome. Third-party chip design plagued with hidden backdoors is the topic for this. They said in November 2014, it was announced that AMD signed a contract with the Taiwanese chip manufacturer AS Media, according to which AS Media would design that's a reference 12, AMD's chipset for the upcoming Zen processor series. This chipset, codenamed Promontory, plays a central role within the company's latest generation Ryzen and Ryzen Pro workstations. It is responsible for linking the processor to external devices such as hard drives, USB devices, PCIe cards, and occasionally also network Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Although it is branded AMD, the Promontory chipset is not based on AMD technology. Rather, it is an amalgamation of several integrated circuits that AS Media has been selling to OEMs for years, all merged together onto a single silicon die. I'm skipping a whole bunch where they really tear AS Media apart, saying that the chips that were glued together have a long history of problems. They exist on other motherboards and may themselves be problems, but essentially the essence is that AS Media just pulled a bunch of their existing stuff, kind of threw it together, stuck it on a die, and said, here you go. And so in their Q&A, they ask, doesn't this publication put users at risk? And I would argue their statement, no. They say, all technical details that could be used to reproduce the vulnerabilities have been redacted from this publication. They say CTS has shared this information with AMD, Microsoft, and a small number of companies that could produce patches and mitigations. On the other hand, we know from a practical standpoint that telling the world 24 hours after you revealed this to AMD, there's just no way that that's not irresponsible. At a minimum, 90 days to allow AMD, or a week to allow AMD to evaluate it independently, come to their own conclusions, and produce a response. Not even that courtesy was given. So it's very difficult not to hold these people responsible for, to some degree, to any damage which occurs as a consequence of the fact that it's not possible to expect anyone to react in 24 hours to this kind of disclosure. And this is an outboard chipset. We know very little about it at this point. I'm sure I'll have a follow-up next week. the good news is they did not release, I mean, thank goodness, proof of concept or additional details. The problem is that the world now knows, the hacker world now knows there is a big juicy target here, and there's now a race to see whether well, first of all, whether there's any remediation that can be done. Then that has to get created and has to get somehow pushed out to the affected motherboards, while in parallel, bad guys are working to figure out what it was that CTS has figured out and leverage it before that can happen. So anyway, there's no takeaway for our listeners, nothing we can do at this point. I have a bunch of AMD-based machines. I'm largely an Intel shop, but I have AMD because, they're a strong source of 64-bit systems, as we know. So I will just be following this news and, of course, keep our listeners informed. The good news is it's not clear what role Microsoft could play. We do know that Microsoft has an active patchable channel, a patching channel. As we talked last week, they've started to use that to patch the Intel microcode. This is outboard microcode, so this will be microcode of that chipset. So it's not clear to me what the path is for getting that fixed. Maybe, if there's access to it from the main CPU, then that is programmatic access, then presumably AMD could produce and Microsoft could push a patch for Windows users at least. And of course, Windows is not the only OS to run on AMD chips. Maybe we'll see something happen in the Linux community even before. I mean, who knows? We'll be watching it closely because this is, as you commented, Leo, at the top of the show, when you heard it was the Ryzen family that were affected, this has got to be really bad news for AMD. I'm disappointed, frankly, that CTS did this. It would have been much more reasonable for them to give AMD some time to respond, for example, for a remediation and a patch to be available in the channel, and for these guys to say, okay, we're the people who found this. I don't understand why that didn't
unless
happen.
they felt like it was going to be imminently come out in other ways, or
Yeah, good point. Yep.
there are reasons you might want to make it go public as soon as possible.
Well, nothing could possibly put AMD under more pressure. So if there was any sense that they weren't going to be listened to, that AMD was blowing them off, that it wasn't going to get fixed, in like as you said, maybe they do have some information about something else going on that really makes this have to happen as fast as possible. We just don't know yet. So I imagine more information will be coming, and we'll, of course, keep our listeners in the loop.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Not what you want to have happen.
I guess this means you shouldn't buy an AMD processor for a while. I mean, there are people in the chat room who say, gosh, I was going to go get one today.
Yeah,
I would wait a little while, at least to hear what mitigations there are. Maybe it's not a real threat, and maybe AMD will come out and say, we've analyzed this, it's not a real threat, or I don't know.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's not like Intel doesn't have its own problems, right?
Right. And maybe, most of this is firmware updatable, apparently, except for the hardware variant of the Chimera flaw. And we don't know that you can't work around that with firmware to maybe shut down something. Maybe it means you have to turn off one of your USB ports, or who knows. But it would be difficult, yes, Leo, to go and lay money out right now. Well, but it's also a function of your exposure. If it's I mean, I guess like if it's your own machine.
Do we know what the mechanism for an attack would be? Does it?
No, we don't yet. Although, based on what little we know, it looks like because this chipset is like that outboard chip, this promontory chip, which is where the problems are. I mean, it is the glue for all the I/O. So, hard drive, LAN, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. I mean, you name it. It potentially has access into the chip. Though, again, we don't know how it is that you leverage this. And the good news is, I mean, AMD just must be gasping right now. I'm sure within the next day or two, because I'm sure they're motivated to help create some AMD side calibration. We should know more. And so, maybe wait just a couple days and see what AMD says. If they're able to say, okay, definitively, this is only a local attack through USB, that kind of thing, then you would probably, and if they're able to say, and we've got a fix on the way, then I'd say, yeah, fine, go ahead.
Wow. Poor Aunt Pruitt just got his a week ago. But it doesn't necessarily mean this is panic time for you either as a user.
No, well, and here we are. What is it? It's the middle of March, and we've been talking about Spectre Meltdown all year, and there still isn't a widespread known exploit of that. And so, it's not, we're 10 weeks in, and the good news, I mean, if there's an upside, it's that this couldn't possibly motivate AMD any more strongly, and no doubt AS Media is saying, whoops.
Yeah, no kid. Well, I even wonder, whoops, or did they get caught up to no good, right?
Yeah.
If you put a back
to,
door into these chips,
if it's really a hardware back door, it's very hard to. I mean, that AMD was unaware of. That AMD didn't ask
this may not be AMD's fault. Probably those at least are not AMD's fault. Probably ASM just did it. Is ASM on mainland China?
Yes.
They're Taiwanese.
Okay,
yes.
so not Taiwan. That's different.
So not mainland, but who knows?
I would be suspicious of mainland Chinese manufacturers because they could easily be subverted by the government, whether they wanted to or not.
Well, in fact, we've got a couple stories about what's happening with China today. So we'll be talking about that in a second. So yes, you're certainly right. One thing that is a little disturbing, this doesn't affect people outside of Turkey, Syria, and Egypt, but but from a technology capability standpoint, it is worrisome because it could affect us all, and that is that ISPs in those three countries have been caught using, I'm annoyed with this term, deep packet inspection. All it really means is hardware which is operating at the packet level. That is, it's not just a router which is looking at packet headers and sending things around. It's going into the packet in order to see what's going on. It turns out that there is a company, Sandvine, which has a line of hardware called the Packet Logic devices, which Sandvine argues are not designed for this purpose, and they're not happy that they've been called out and having been found.
Well, we should point out that there are ISPs who use Sandvine for deep packet inspection. And I think it was Comcast, it was one of the U.S. ISPs was using it to block BitTorrent.
Yes, exactly. And in fact, Citizen Lab are the researchers who caught this behavior and reported their findings to Sandvine, which says that Citizen Labs, who I strongly believe is correct, report is false, misleading, and wrong, and demanded that Citizen Lab return to them the second-hand Packet Logic device, which Citizen Lab used to confirm the attribution of the network fingerprint that the Sandvine devices were using. So it looks to me like Citizen Lab did everything right. So here's what they found. Turkey's telecom network, which had some overlap in Syria, so thus some Syrian ISPs were involved, or Syrian citizens at least, were using Sandvine's packet logic devices to redirect hundreds of targeted users. So not everybody, but if you were a known customer of Turkey Telecom, so, for example, journalists, lawyers, and human rights defenders, your typical targets in those environments, to malicious versions of legitimate programs bundled, and those programs were bundled with FinFisher and another spyware or malware known as Strong Pity. When they tried to download them from a